Student learning outcomes. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to write an equation of a line given 2 points on a line. In this example, we're asked to write an equation of a line in standard form passing through the points -2, -1, and -4, -7. Now recall from a previous lecture that I mentioned to you that you need two things in order to write a line. You can't write a line unless you have those two things. Do you recall what those two things are? Well, one of those things I said you need to know the slope. The other thing, you need a point on the line. Now in this example, they gave us 2 points. Now we're only going to need one of those points to plug into the formula. And recall, you're also going to need a formula to plug it in. You can plug in the y equals mx plus b, the slope-intercept form, or you can plug in the point slope formula, which is y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. So again, we do have a point, but what we don't have is a slope. So the first thing we need to do is to use the 2 points to identify what the slope is. So recall, you can find the slope if you know 2 points by simply plugging them into the slope formula of y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So let's go ahead and plug the given values into the slope formula. When we do so, it's going to look like so. Recall, double negatives become positives. If the signs are different, subtract. Take the sign from the larger number. A negative divided by a negative is going to give us a positive slope of 3. And so now we have the two things that we need to plug into the formula. You need to know, again, the slope, which we now know is 3, and you need a point. Now, they gave us 2 points, so it doesn't matter which one you use. Either point will give you the correct line, but you cannot use both in plugging into the formula. So I'm going to go ahead and just plug in the first one for now, the first point of -2, -1. So I'm going to go ahead and plug it into the slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. Excuse me. That means that we're going to remove the y and replace it with what? What is our y value? That's correct. If we're using the point -2, -1, our y value is -1. So we're going to plug in a -1 in y's place. What are we plugging into m's place? If you said 3, that's correct, because recall, we found out that the slope was 3. What are we plugging into x place? Well, what is your x value? Our x value is -2, so we're going to plug in a -2 in x's place. And recall, when you're plugging it values into the slope-intercept form, that you won't know what b is. That is your job to find out what b is. So we're going to go ahead and plug in those given values so that we can find out what b is. Let's go ahead and multiply. 3 times -2 is going to give me -6. One last step to getting b all by itself. Yes, we're going to add 6 to each side, and b equals 5. Now recall, with this formula, it only gives you b. You have to put everything together. So y equals mx plus b. Y equals m, we know is 3, so that's going to be y equals 3x, and we just found out that b was 5, so that will be y equals 3x plus 5, and there you have it in slope-intercept form. And for those of you who prefer the point slope form, we're going to go ahead and plug in our given values. Recall that you are not going to plug your given points into the x and y by themselves. Never plug in any points into those values. You're going to plug in the sub 1 points. So into y sub 1, you're going to replace that with a -1. You're going to remove x sub 1 and replace it with -2. And you're going to remove m and replace with 3. We're using the same value here. When we do so, it's going to look like so. Remember, double negatives become positives. Next, we're going to go ahead and use the distributive property on the right side. That's 3 times x is 3x, and 3 times 2 is 6. Last step to solving for y is to subtract 1 from each side. And when we subtract 1 from each side, you'll notice we'll have the same answer of our line, which is y equals 3x plus 5. Now, what if you were asked to write this equation in standard form? Recall, standard form is where x is first, then y, and then the number, the constant, is on the side by itself. So all we need to do is to move 3x from the right side and move it over to the left side. And to do that, we're going to have to subtract 3x from each side. Recall that the coefficient of x cannot be a negative or a fraction. In this case, it is a negative. So all we have to do in order to make sure that it is positive is just to multiply all parts of the equation by -1. You can either multiply or divide, whichever is fine, whichever works best for you. So let's go ahead and do that. What you're going to do essentially, you know, a negative, the effect that a negative does to any number, it just simply makes it its opposite. So instead of -3x plus y equals 5, when you do that process of multiplying or dividing by a -1, what you're going to get is positive 3x minus y equals -5. You're going to get the very opposite, because that's what that negative effect does. And there you have it. There's your line in standard form.